The massive circular chamber floated in the void of space, its transparent walls offering a view of distant galaxies. Inside, representatives from 47 alien species gathered around the central holographic display. The air hummed with translation devices converting thousands of languages into comprehensible speech. Ambassador Thomas Blake sat in the human delegation's seat, a simple chair compared to the elaborate thrones and floating platforms of older species. At 43 years old, with graying hair and tired eyes, he looked unremarkable among beings who had lived for centuries. He had represented Earth for only 2 years in a council where some members had served for lifetimes. The hologram in the center shifted, displaying 2 massive neutron stars spinning through space. Their paths curved inevitably toward each other, drawn by gravity's relentless pull. Between them, highlighted in soft blue light, sat the Veshan system. 6 planets, 12 moons, 6 billion living souls. The collision will occur in 47 standard days, announced the Council's chief scientist, a floating orb of crystalline material that chimed like bells when it spoke. The energy released will sterilize everything within 8 light hours. The Veshan civilization will be completely destroyed. Silence fell across the chamber. Even species that rarely showed emotion seemed affected by the weight of those words. Elder Moravith rose from his platform. The Korvathi leader stood 4 meters tall, his skin like ancient stone, his 6 eyes gleaming with the wisdom of 4,000 years. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of the galaxy's oldest surviving species. The Council has reviewed all possible solutions, Moravith said slowly. Evacuation is our only option. We have 47 days to move 6 billion Veshans to temporary colonies. It will be difficult, but it can be done. Their homeworld, however, will be lost. There is no alternative. The Veshan ambassador, a graceful being whose translucent skin pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, dimmed visibly. Her voice trembled through the translation system. Our world has existed for 8,000 years. Our history, our culture, our sacred places, all gone. I am truly sorry, Moravith replied, and he seemed to mean it. But no species in galactic history has ever moved stellar masses. The energy requirements are beyond calculation. The gravitational forces involved are absolute. It simply cannot be done. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The gaseous Zephirites swirled in patterns that indicated reluctant acceptance. The insectoid travelers clicked their mandibles in sympathy but offered no solutions. This was reality. This was the universe's harsh truth. Some things were simply impossible. Thomas Blake had been listening quietly, his fingers tapping against his data pad. He had reviewed the same reports, seen the same calculations. He knew what the galaxy's greatest minds had concluded, but he also knew something they did not. He stood up. The chamber barely noticed at first. Humanity was still considered a junior species, barely 200 years into galactic society. They were known for their curiosity and their stubborn nature, but not for their scientific achievements. Not yet. Elder Moravith, Thomas said, his voice cutting through the murmurs. With respect, there may be another option. The chamber fell silent. Moravith's 6 eyes focused on the human ambassador. Ambassador Blake, I appreciate human optimism, but this is not a matter of hope. This is physics. The mathematics are absolute. I understand, Thomas replied calmly. But humanity has been researching stellar engineering for the past 200 years. We've run simulations. We've developed theoretical models. And we believe we can alter the trajectory of the smaller neutron star enough to prevent the collision. The silence that followed was different now. It was not respectful quiet but shocked disbelief. A representative from the Methodian consensus spoke, its crystalline body chiming sharply. You are suggesting redirecting a stellar mass? That is impossible. The energy alone would require the equivalent output of 17,000 Type 2 civilization power grids operating simultaneously for 72 hours, Thomas interrupted. We know. We can generate it. Elder Moravith leaned forward. Ambassador Blake, do you understand what you are suggesting? If you fail, you will lose ships, crews, resources. And the Veshans will still die. Why would you risk so much for a statistical impossibility? Thomas looked at the Veshan ambassador, at her dimming light that spoke of grief and lost hope. Then he looked back at Moravith. Because it is not impossible, Thomas said simply. It is difficult. There is a difference. And humanity specializes in turning difficult into achievable. This is madness, someone muttered from the back rows. Perhaps, Thomas acknowledged. But we would like permission to try. If we fail, you can proceed with evacuation. But if we succeed, 6 billion people keep their home. The Veshan ambassador's light brightened suddenly, flickering with desperate hope. You would truly attempt this? For us. You barely know our species. Thomas smiled slightly. We know you need help. That is enough. The council erupted into debate. Some species called it arrogance. Others called it impossible. A few called it insane. But after 3 hours of argument, a vote was called. By a narrow margin, humanity was granted permission. Thomas activated his communication device immediately. Commander Mitchell, this is Blake. Execute Protocol Prometheus. We have 47 days. On the other end, Commander Elizabeth Mitchell's voice was absolutely steady. Understood, Ambassador. Mobilizing all deep space assets now. We will save them. Thomas looked out at the stars at the impossible task ahead. Yes, he said quietly. We will. Dr. Helen Carter stood on the observation deck of the spacecraft Defiance, staring at the holographic model floating before her. The two neutron stars glowed in the projection, spinning slowly, their paths marked in red. At 56 years old, she had spent 3 decades studying stars. She had written papers that other scientists called brilliant. She had taught at universities across Earth. But all of that had been theory. Mathematics on screens. Safe predictions made from a distance. This was real. The smaller star weighs as much as 1.4 of our suns, she said to the team gathered around her. We need to change its path by 0.003 degrees. Just a tiny push. But at these speeds and masses, even tiny means everything. Lieutenant James Cooper, a young man barely 30 years old, shook his head while typing calculations into his tablet. That amount of energy, ma'am, it is completely insane. Yes, Helen agreed. It is. But insane is what we do best. Admiral Robert Hayes walked into the room, his boots heavy on the metal floor. At 60 years old, he had commanded fleets through dangerous space, negotiated with pirates and survived 3 major battles. But he had never attempted anything like this. Nobody had. Status report, he said simply. 2,000 ships are arriving in the Veshan system, reported Lieutenant Anna Foster from her console. Construction crews, military vessels, science ships, cargo transports. Everything we have is coming. What about the other species? Robert asked. 17 alien species have placed observation posts at the edge of the system, Anna continued. They are watching us. Some are betting we will fail. Robert smiled grimly. Then let us give them a show they will never forget. The work began immediately. Humanity moved like a machine that had trained for this moment, even though nobody truly had. Construction teams assembled massive platforms in space, each one the size of a small city. These were the gravitational anchors, devices designed to create artificial gravity fields strong enough to influence a neutron star. Peter Sullivan was a construction foreman, a big man with rough hands and a loud voice. He commanded a team of 40 workers who welded metal in the vacuum of space, their suits protecting them from radiation and cold. They worked in 12-hour shifts, then 16-hour shifts, then they stopped counting hours altogether. Sleep became something you did when your body forced you to stop. On the 8th day, a solar flare erupted from one of the neutron stars. The radiation hit a construction platform before warnings could be sent. Peter watched 2 of his team members die instantly, their suits failing, their bodies drifting into space. He called for recovery crews, marked their names in his log and kept working. He had to. There was no time for grief. 6 billion lives needed him to finish this platform. The alien observers watched with growing surprise. They had expected humans to work hard, but this was something else. This was obsession. This was desperation transformed into action. They do not stop, noted a Methodian observer to its companion. Even when their people die, they continue. I do not understand this species. Energy collectors were positioned next, enormous structures that would capture power from the ships and channel it into the gravitational anchors. Each collector required precise alignment. Even 1 degree of error would cause the entire system to fail. Helen worked 20 hours each day, checking calculations, running simulations, fixing problems. Her eyes burned. Her head ached. She drank coffee until her hands shook, then drank more. The simulation results appeared on her screen in endless streams of numbers. The Veshan people sent supply ships filled with food, water, and medical supplies. They could not help build the platforms or calculate the mathematics, but they could support the humans who could. Their ambassador visited the Defiance and met with Helen personally. Why do you sacrifice so much for us? The ambassador asked, her bioluminescent skin glowing with confusion and gratitude. We have nothing to offer you in return. Helen looked up from her calculations, her tired eyes meeting the ambassador's glowing ones. You do not need to offer us anything. You need help. That is reason enough. The days passed in a blur of construction, calculation, and coordination. 30 days left. 20 days. 10 days. With 9 days remaining, Helen ran the final simulation. She watched the numbers cascade across her screen. She ran it again. Then a third time. Each time the result was the same. She walked slowly to Admiral Robert's office. Her legs felt weak. Her stomach twisted with dread. We have a problem, she said quietly. Robert looked up from his reports. He saw the expression on her face and knew immediately it was serious. Tell me. The final calculations show we need 18% more power than we have, Helen said. Even with every ship at maximum output, even with all the collectors operating perfectly, we are still short. We cannot generate enough energy to move the star. Robert stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the fleet of 2,000 ships. Each one carried crews who had worked themselves to exhaustion. Each one represented families back on Earth waiting for news. Good people. Brave people. His people. Then we will find the extra power, he said firmly. We did not come this far to fail. We will find a way. But Admiral, where could we possibly? We will find it, Robert repeated, turning to face her. His eyes were hard with determination. Because failure is not an option. Do you understand me, Doctor? Helen nodded slowly. She did not know where the extra power would come from. She did not know how they would solve this impossible problem. But she knew they would try. That was what humans did. Helen stood at her console watching 2,000 ships position themselves in a perfect geometric pattern around the neutron star. Each vessel had to be exactly in the right place, not even a meter off. The synchronization had to be perfect down to 1/1000th of a second. One mistake and everything would fail. All ships report ready, Lieutenant Anna Foster announced from her station. Her voice was steady, but Helen could hear the tension underneath. Admiral Robert Hayes stood at the command center, his hand hovering over the activation switch. He looked at the faces around him. Young faces. Old faces. People who had worked without sleep for weeks. People who trusted him to make the right decisions. All stations, this is Admiral Hayes, he transmitted to the entire fleet. On my mark, fire all energy beams. 3, 1, a mark. 2,000 beams of concentrated energy shot through space simultaneously. They struck the gravitational anchors which amplified the power and directed it at the neutron star. The effect was invisible to human eyes, but the instruments showed it clearly. The massive star, weighing more than an entire sun, trembled slightly in its path. Trajectory change detected, Helen called out, her eyes locked on her screen. 0.001 degrees. Robert's jaw tightened. Not enough. Prepare for second pulse. The second pulse drained the ship's reactors dangerously low. Warning alarms screamed across the fleet. Every vessel was operating at maximum capacity, pushing their systems beyond safe limits. Metal groaned. Circuits overheated. And then the Resolution, a military cruiser on the outer edge of the formation, lost containment. The explosion was brief and brilliant. 40 crew members died instantly. Trajectory change now at 0.0015 degrees, Helen reported, her voice cracking. She knew people on the Resolution. Good people. Still not enough, Admiral. Robert stared at the display showing their power reserves. They had one more shot. Just one. But the mathematics were clear. They did not have enough energy. They were short by 18%. He pulled up the fleet roster on his private screen. 847 ships were classified as auxiliary vessels. Transports. Supply ships. Medical frigates. They carried non-essential personnel and equipment. Their reactors were smaller but still functional. If those ships donated their entire reactor cores to the energy grid, they would provide the missing 18%. But those ships would be dead afterward. No power. No life support. No engines. Just floating metal boxes in the void of space, waiting for rescue that might take weeks. Robert opened a fleet-wide channel. All auxiliary vessels, this is Admiral Hayes. I need volunteers for reactor core donation. Your ships will lose all power. You will be stranded until rescue arrives. This is voluntary only. I repeat, voluntary only. Silence filled the communication channel for exactly 3 seconds. Then every single auxiliary vessel responded at once. Volunteering, sir. 847 ships. 12,000 crew members. All volunteering to be stranded in deep space. Captain William Nash sat in the pilot's seat of the transport ship Mercy. He was 41 years old with a wife named Kate and a daughter named Emma back on Earth. He pulled up their last video message and watched his daughter talk about her school project. She was building a model spaceship. She said she wanted to be like her daddy. William smiled and recorded a quick message. Emma, sweetheart, Daddy loves you very much. Tell your mom I love her too. I'm doing something important today. Something that will help a lot of people. I'm proud to do it. Be good, study hard, and keep building those spaceships. He sent the message, then transferred Mercy's entire reactor core to the main grid. The lights went out. The engines died. The gentle hum of life support faded to silence. Across the fleet, 847 ships went dark. All reactor cores transferred successfully, Anna reported, tears running down her face. We have full power now. Helen checked her calculations one final time. The numbers were green. They had enough. Admiral, we can do this. One more pulse. This is our last chance. Robert looked at the dark ships floating in space. 12,000 people sitting in darkness, trusting him. Trusting humanity. He pressed the activation switch. All ships, fire everything we have. The combined power of 2,000 ships plus 847 donated reactor cores poured into the gravitational web. The energy output was staggering, more power than some civilizations used in a year, all focused on one impossible goal. The neutron star moved. Trajectory shift, 0.002 degrees, 0.0025, 0.003. Helen was shouting now, her professional calm completely gone. 0.0031 degrees. We did it. We actually did it. The neutron stars passed each other. The distance between them was 8,000 kilometers. In cosmic terms, that was nothing. A hair's width. But it was enough. The Veshan system was safe. Cheers erupted across the Defiance. People were crying, hugging, screaming with joy. Even Admiral Robert Hayes allowed himself a small smile. But Helen was not celebrating. She was looking at the 847 dark ships. 12,000 people floating in the void. Some ships had enough emergency life support for weeks. Others had only days. Begin rescue operations immediately, Robert ordered, his moment of celebration over. I want every person recovered. Every single one. The alien observers at the edge of the system transmitted their reports back to their homeworlds. The transmissions were almost identical. All contained the same core message. Humanity has achieved the impossible. They moved a star. They saved 6 billion lives. And they sacrificed their own people to do it. We do not understand this species. But we must learn from them. Helen Carter floated in the observation deck of the Defiance, her face pressed against the cold glass. Outside, small rescue shuttles moved like insects between the dead ships. 847 vessels hung motionless in space, dark and silent. 12,000 people waited inside them, breathing stale air, rationing water, hoping rescue would come before their emergency supplies ran out. She had not slept in 90 hours. Her uniform was stained with coffee and sweat. Her hands trembled constantly now, though she could not tell if it was from exhaustion or emotion. They had saved 6 billion Veshans. That should feel like victory. But all she could think about was the cost. 3,200 humans were dead. Most died from radiation exposure, their suits failing against the intense energy from the neutron stars. Some died in equipment failures, crushed when platforms collapsed or when reactors exploded. 40 died on the Resolution when it lost containment. She knew many of their names. Had worked with them. Had shared meals and jokes and hopes for the future. Lieutenant Anna Foster appeared beside her, carrying 2 cups of coffee. You should rest, Doctor. I cannot, Helen said quietly. Not while our people are still out there. The rescue operations are going well. Admiral Hayes estimates everyone will be recovered within 6 days. 6 days. Helen closed her eyes. Some ships only have 4 days of life support left. They stood in silence, watching the rescue shuttles work. Each shuttle could carry 20 people. The mathematics were simple but brutal. 2,000 trips minimum. Each trip took hours. Time was running out for some of those crews. A massive ship appeared at the edge of the system. Then another. And another. The Galactic Council had arrived. Elder Morvitha's vessel was the largest, a cathedral of metal and crystal that had traveled the galaxy for centuries. It docked with the Defiance, and the ancient Korvathi leader walked through the airlock, his 6 eyes taking in everything. Behind him came representatives from 20 other species. Helen met them in the docking bay. She knew she looked terrible, exhausted and broken, but she did not care. Let them see what their impossible task had cost. We witnessed your accomplishment, Morvith said slowly. His deep voice carried a weight that Helen had never heard before. It sounded like respect, like awe. The mathematical precision was perfect. The energy coordination was flawless. The execution was beyond anything we thought possible. I have lived 4,000 years, Dr. Carter. I have seen civilizations rise and fall. I have never seen anything like what your species just did. We lost 3,200 people, Helen replied. Her voice was flat, empty. That is the price of your impossible task. Yes, Morvith said. For a species not your own. For people you had never met, on worlds you had never visited. You gave everything. A Methodian representative chimed softly. We do not understand. By our calculations, humanity gained nothing from this action. You spent enormous resources. You lost thousands of lives. You have 847 ships that must be repaired or replaced. The cost is staggering. What did you gain? Before Helen could answer, a voice spoke from behind her. We gained the knowledge that we tried. Captain William Nash stood there, still wearing his captain's uniform despite his ship being powerless and dead. He had been brought over from the Mercy on one of the first rescue shuttles because his life support was failing. His face was pale and thin from rationing food and water for 3 days. But he stood straight. We gained the knowledge that 6 billion people are alive because we did not accept impossible, William continued. We gained the knowledge that when someone needs help, we help them. That is what we gained. The Veshan ambassador approached, her bioluminescent skin glowing in patterns that Helen had learned meant deep gratitude and love. Humanity has given my people everything. Our children will grow up. Our elders will see another sunrise. Our civilization will continue. We can never repay this debt. We do not want repayment, Helen said tiredly. We just wanted you to live. That is enough. Admiral Robert Hayes entered the docking bay, his uniform crisp despite the chaos around them. He had been coordinating rescue operations for 3 days straight, sleeping only in brief moments between crises. Elder Morvith, the Council's rescue ships are helping us recover our stranded crews. We appreciate the assistance. It is the least we can do, Morvith replied. The Council owes humanity more than assistance. We owe you an apology. He turned to address all the alien representatives present. We called humans a junior species. We treated them as students who had much to learn. We were wrong. They are not junior. They never were. We simply failed to understand what they truly are. And what are we? Robert asked quietly. Morvith's 6 eyes focused on him. You are a species that looks at the word impossible and asks why. You are a species that sacrifices everything for others without expecting reward. You are a species that changes reality through sheer determination. You are a species that the galaxy needs. A Zephyrite observer swirled forward, its gaseous form shimmering. We have observed many species in our history. None have ever attempted what you attempted. None have ever succeeded at what you succeeded. You have shown us that our limitations are not universal laws. They are simply boundaries we accepted without question. The galaxy will change because of what happened here, added another representative. You have proven that impossible is simply a challenge waiting to be overcome. Helen looked out the window again at the rescue operations. Another shuttle was bringing crew members home. 20 more people safe. She thought about Peter Sullivan and his construction team, working through exhaustion and grief. She thought about William Nash, recording goodbye messages to his family before giving up his ship's power. She thought about the 3,200 who died, who would never see their families again. The cost was high, she said to Morvith. Very high. Yes, the ancient being agreed. But the alternative was 6 billion deaths and the acceptance that some things cannot be changed. You rejected that alternative. You paid the price willingly. That is what makes humanity extraordinary. Robert placed a hand on Helen's shoulder. Come on, Doctor. We still have people to rescue. We can mourn later. Right now we work. Helen nodded and followed him out of the docking bay. Behind them, the alien representatives stood in silence, watching the humans return to their impossible task of bringing everyone home. They were beginning to understand what humanity meant when they said those 2 simple words. We do. Ambassador Thomas Blake walked through the gardens of the Veshan Parliament building, his feet splashing softly through the shallow water that covered the pathways. The Veshans were aquatic beings who designed their structures half-submerged, and Thomas had learned to enjoy the cool water against his ankles. Above him, the sky was brilliant blue, unmarred by destruction. This world still existed because humans had refused to accept impossible. Young Veshan children swam past him in the deeper pools, their bioluminescent skin flashing in patterns that meant joy and playfulness. They had no memory of the terror their parents felt when two neutron stars approached. They simply lived as children should, unaware that they almost never existed. Ambassador Blake, called a Veshan official, her skin glowing with respect patterns. The Parliament wishes to thank humanity again for the gift. The gift. 3 ocean worlds in Veshan space, perfect for human colonization. Earth was overcrowded, its cities bursting, its resources strained. These 3 worlds would provide homes for 200 million humans. It was a generous offer, one the Veshans insisted on despite humanity asking for nothing. Your people are too kind, Thomas said. Our people are alive, the official replied simply. Kindness is the smallest thing we can offer. But the real changes were happening across the entire galaxy, in ways Thomas had not expected. The Zephyrhites, gaseous beings who floated through space without solid form, had always believed deep core mining was impossible for them. Their bodies could not withstand the pressure and heat of planetary cores. It was accepted fact, taught in their schools, written in their scientific texts. Until 3 months ago. A team of Zephyrite scientists developed pressure suits that allowed them to survive in extreme environments. They successfully extracted rare minerals from their home planet's core, something their species had never done before. When asked why they attempted the impossible, their lead scientist said, "We watched humans move a star. We decided our excuses were no longer valid." The Methodians, crystalline beings of pure logic and calculation, had dismissed zero-point energy as theoretical fantasy. The mathematics suggested it was possible, but the engineering seemed too complex, too difficult, too risky. They were now building their first zero-point reactor. Even the ancient Korvathi, who had lived for thousands of years and believed they had seen everything worth seeing, had reopened research programs they abandoned centuries ago. Quantum tunneling, faster-than-light communication, consciousness transfer. Projects they had called impractical were suddenly worth attempting again. A new phrase had entered the galactic common language. Humanity's certainty. It meant the belief that impossible was simply difficult not yet overcome. It meant refusing to accept limitations without trying to break them. It meant looking at challenges and asking not if they could be solved but how. Thomas received daily reports of species attempting things they had never tried before. Some failed. Many succeeded. But all of them were trying, and that was what mattered. He stood now in the Galactic Council chamber, the same place where he had offered humanity's help 6 months ago. The chamber looked the same, but everything felt different. Humanity's seat had been moved from the outer ring to the inner circle, among the essential species. The species whose voices shaped galactic policy. Elder Moravith called the session to order, his 6 eyes scanning the assembled representatives. "We face a new crisis," he announced gravely. "A plague has struck the Korvathi homeworld. It spreads through our population rapidly. 2 million of my people are already dead. Our medical experts have studied it extensively." A hologram appeared showing microscopic images of the plague. It was complex, attacking genetic code in ways that seemed almost intelligent. "Our biology is too intricate," Moravith continued. "Our genetic structure has evolved over millions of years into something incredibly complicated. The plague exploits this complexity. Our doctors say there is no cure. The biology is too advanced. The mutations happen too quickly. It cannot be done." The chamber fell into heavy silence. The Korvathi were one of the oldest species in the galaxy. Losing them would be like losing the galaxy's memory. Thomas stood slowly. Around him, other representatives were standing too. The Veshan ambassador rose, her skin glowing with determination. The Zephyrite observer swirled upward. The Methodian representative's crystalline body chimed softly. Dozens of species, all rising together. Thomas looked at Elder Moravith, at the ancient being who had once told him that moving stars was impossible. He smiled. "Elder Moravith," Thomas said clearly. "With respect." The entire council chamber, hundreds of representatives from dozens of species, spoke as one voice. The words echoed off the walls, powerful and certain. "We do." Moravith's 6 eyes widened. For a moment the ancient leader seemed overwhelmed. Then, slowly, something remarkable happened. He smiled. Thomas had never seen a Korvathi smile before. He had not known they could. "Then let us begin," Moravith said quietly. The chamber erupted into organized chaos. Species volunteered their best scientists. The Veshans offered their advanced biochemistry knowledge. The Methodians brought their computational power. The Zephyrhites contributed their understanding of quantum medicine. And humanity offered their medical teams, their research facilities, and their absolute refusal to accept failure. Dr. Helen Carter watched from the observation gallery above, standing beside Admiral Robert Hayes. They had been invited as honored guests, representatives of the species that changed everything. They learned, Helen said softly, watching the species below coordinate their efforts with efficiency that would have been impossible 6 months ago. We taught them, Robert replied. We showed them that impossible is just a word. That together, with determination and sacrifice, anything can be overcome. Do you think they will find a cure? Helen asked. Robert watched the chamber below, watched species that had once worked in isolation now collaborating without hesitation. Yes, they will find it, because they believe they can. And belief is where all impossible things begin. Below them, the galactic community mobilized. Human medical ships were already launching toward the Korvathi homeworld. Methodian gene sequencers were being loaded onto Veshan transports. Zephyrite quantum scanners were being calibrated for biological analysis. The impossible was about to become possible again. Not because one species attempted it alone, but because the entire galaxy had learned humanity's most important lesson. When faced with impossible challenges, when told that something cannot be done, there was only one acceptable response. We do. And together they would prove it again.